All right, there we are. So this is the Business Life and Brotherhood podcast. It looks like we're live now. I'm Justin Gazba, and today we are with Dylan Hoffman. And so, Dylan, excited to have you on the show. We just went through some technical difficulty.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will come through. But for the folks listening and watching at home, why don't you give us a quick bio, and we'll try it again. 30, 70 seconds, whatever, just really quickly, kind of your college, your alma mater, little chapter, and then kind of, a synopsis, I guess, of kind of the work history, and then we'll deep dive in. So take it away.
Great. So can you hear me okay is my first question here.
Yeah, 100% improved.
Excellent.
So yeah, I think we're good.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, hey, Justin, thanks for having me here. Excited to get roped back into AK Side, the Alumni Network. I think this is a great project you're doing. So yes, name is Dylan Hoffman. Went to Seattle University, graduated in 2013. So been out of school for is it 3 years now? Is it 4 years? I don't know. I'm starting to lose track. It's starting to get farther and farther away. Let's see. So graduated, went to work for and continue to work for Accenture, which for those that aren't familiar is a big consulting firm. I do business strategy consulting there, mostly in our technology and emerging technology space. So I'm working with a lot of the heavy hitters, Microsoft, Xbox, a little bit with Google and Facebook, the sexy guys that you hear about all the time in the news. So that's fun. It's interesting, always keeping me on my toes and learning about latest and greatest in technology. In addition to that, I am out here in Columbus right now, taking this interview with 3 of my partners, and we're currently in the process of opening a co-working space. So really excited about that. For those that aren't familiar with co-working, we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, so starting to flex my entrepreneurship muscles a little bit. Excited that takes me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you say Columbus, are you out in Ohio then, or tell me which Columbus you're at?
Yeah, Columbus, Ohio. So
Okay,
pretty far away from home. And I look around and it's a lot different from Seattle.
Like Columbus. Yeah, I was trying to figure out. So okay, perfect. So okay, that's awesome. I definitely want to jump into what you're doing with the co-work space there for sure. So I'm going to mispronounce the name of the firm that you're with. Can you say that again? It's like it's not Excalibur, but that's what I wrote down.
Accenture. So it's supposed to be like accent on the future. That's the that's the cheesy slogan that we go with. It's a big consulting firm though. I think we're at 400,000 employees now. Yeah.
So that's awesome. And you've been there since graduation then?
Yeah. And that's the thing with consulting is it's such a flexible industry and such a flexible space. So I've kind of moved around and done different things within Accenture, tried out a few different industries, worked in healthcare, worked in energy, landed in technology just because, A, technology is so relevant to today, and B, I just think that space, especially emerging technology, is so interesting. Looking at, all these exciting things that are going to eventually revolutionize the way we live and work and do everything. That's Internet of Things, that's virtual reality. You hear about automated vehicles and all this crazy stuff happening. So myself and my team are kind of in the pit working with the companies that are developing those technologies, as well as companies that are seeking to use those technologies to make their products better. So it's interesting. It's a fun space.
So that is super interesting. When I think of consulting, I don't have any idea what that means. Not in the sense of like one of the big four, one of the firms, right? When that works, it's I've watched a little bit of Mad Men, and I know that they come in and they kind of figure out how they're going to present the ad space. But insofar as consulting, like, are they coming to you for like UX design? Are they coming to you for like, hey, how do we make people understand what we're trying to do? Can you give us kind of the most basic layman's terms of what a project might look like?
Sure. So the two things that I'll say that I typically work on are transformation and expansion. And so what that is either a company comes to us and they say, hey, we've been doing things this way, but now based on all these new technologies and digital and right, this like sexy new space that's emerging, we feel like we should be doing things a different way. If that's faster, if that's more automated, whatever it is, we know that some sort of transformation needs to happen. Help us figure out what that transformation is. So what's the strategy, and then B, how do we actually execute on it? So what's the plan?
So is that in practice in their business? Like we've had these departments, they report to us this way. We've had this many reports and this much information, but because of Upwork, I don't need to have those people do that. I can find somebody to do that for a nickel. How do we pivot? Or is it like this product or this service we used to implement and use the service? Is it more of an internal function of the business, or is it more of an external, how do we communicate this product?
Yeah, it does. It could be anything. Is the short answer to that, but the longer, I should say, answer for me at least is I like to work in the market facing space. There's folks that do a lot of the deep internal operating model stuff, and I've touched on that, but I'm more excited how can we change the way that companies are bringing to market? How can we change the actual products and that companies are bringing? How can we change the customer experience? All these get facing. That's what I'm excited about. So that's what I look at.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I know consulting can have so many different meanings, and you can do so many different things, and so that's why, like, even as a career path, these are things that I didn't know existed. You hear about like a consultant and attorneys and these business things that happen, but without being in the space, people really don't have insight as to what that could be. So so I guess that makes a pretty good segue for like, how did you know that this was a direction you wanted to go? How did you end up finding this firm? What did that look like in college and progressing to getting hired and being able to have all these experiences here?
Yep. No, good question. So I'll answer it a couple of ways. Number one is that I was an international business major, which is already inherently a bit more of a generalist major, right? I'm not going deep into any specific topic, but rather I'm taking your whole gamut of business classes with a bit of an international focus on it. So consulting was a natural fit for me because consulting is a similar environment. You're kind of expected to come in as a generalist, and then you work across different business industries and functionalities, and you try different things, and eventually you say, hey, it seems like this part of the business or this part of the industry is something that I really like. I'm going to attach myself to that and become a specialist, quote unquote, in that space. So that's been nice, is the dynamic environment, trying a bunch of different things, slowly refining, if you will, my business acumen and my business skills more broadly, which brings me to answer number two, which is I've always been inspired and energized by entrepreneurship. Now, entrepreneurship, it's a fun word to throw around, but until you actually get involved with something, that's just exactly what it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100% one of the more sexy terms these days. Everybody's an entrepreneur and a CEO.
Everyone's an entrepreneur these days, yeah. But I feel, what I've come to notice is, because you're right, consulting is kind of a gray industry. It's a bit vague and nuanced. So if I could be as clear as possible, I think what I'm really learning day in and day out is what it takes to run a business successfully. I'm exposing myself I'm being exposed to different areas of the business. I'm working a lot with leaders, not necessarily C-suite, although sometimes C-suite, but like, for instance, at Xbox, I've worked a lot with Xbox's COO. So I gain, just from kind of my perspective and where I'm sitting, I start to gain a lot of knowledge and a lot of perspective on what it takes to run, a 10,000 person organization, right? From a process standpoint, from a governance standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been really valuable for me. Those are skills that I'm trying to log away, if it's on paper or just kind of in the back of my mind, so I can hopefully translate those to the startup world. That makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like it would be the best job on the planet to me. And so it's just the way that my brain, the way that I think about it, like you get to taste and try so many different industries in so many different positions, right? It's almost like when I think about, you know, and it's so funny to fall back on it, but like AK Psi or being in college, you get these opportunities to say, okay, here's this problem, here's this project, here's this thing. I'm going to try to jump in and make a go of it. And then what you said earlier about like being a jack of all trades, starting as a generalist, right? And then niching down and saying, you know, it turns out that on all these last few projects, I'm pretty good at this. So let me focus my energy here. And of all these things that I've tried, this is what really excites me over here for you, you know, emerging technologies and stuff like that. So you just keep kind of quarter wrench turn, little pivot, quarter wrench turn, pivot, until you get down into a space that that you can really excel in.
So a good example. Well, yeah. So first of all, thank you for painting consulting in such a nice light. I don't imagine everyone will share your your sentiment, but a good example, just to make something really crisp that people can latch onto, is in my first 18 months in Accenture, I worked on an emerging market strategy project. So helping a company figure out how they can expand into Guatemala, Vietnam, and Eastern Europe more broadly. I did a corporate strategy and pricing strategy. So trying to figure out how to either adjust pricing of of existing products or set prices of new products. I worked in marketing. I worked in product engineering and product design. I did a little bit in IT and data governance. And then I spent a lot of time as well in customer support operations. So, you know, not all of that is interesting, but that's all the exposure I got just in 18 months at Accenture.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And to me, and maybe it's just, you know, like that sounds like the super ideal. So, so for maybe somebody's going to watch this and be like, oh, I didn't realize that could be what consulting could be, or that, you know, I didn't realize that even that field existed. Like I didn't know that you could tune up for something like this. So let's jump back just a touch and figure out, like, retrace our steps here. How did you choose this? How did you get into it? How did you find out about it? And position yourself at college and university to be like, all right, well, this is a direction I can see myself going. You know, share with the folks kind of how to set themselves up for that kind of success.
So I stumbled across consulting actually through a recommendation from my aunt. It was Christmas of my senior year, and I was sitting down at the table, you know, chatting with my aunt, uncle, just kind of family and friends. And they were like, what are you going to do after college? And I said, I hadn't really thought about it yet, even though it was only 6-8 months away. And my aunt suggested consulting. And so I started looking into it, stumbled across Accenture, realized that Accenture, just like most of the big consulting firms, doesn't do any campus recruiting at Seattle University, which is an immediate setback, because that's how these firms hire most of their entry-level folks. Now, some of the smaller consulting firms, West Monroe, Hitachi, some of those more local players, they do, but you know, the big guys, they didn't. So I actually I peeled back the layers through LinkedIn searches and whatnot, and I came across a managing director who worked in Seattle, who had some similarity, you know, some shared interests, if you will, based on the things that they had promoted on their LinkedIn. And I reached out 3 different times over the course of about a month. She responded on the third go. We kicked off a conversation. She said, you know what, why don't you just send me your resume? I'll take a look at it. She might've been thinking that it would be bust, or that it would be a quick 30-second glance. And then, yeah, no, this guy isn't real. So I spent a lot of time refining that bad boy and what's what I'm looking for? Stretching the truth maybe a little bit on the things I was doing in college. She gave me a call back and she said, you know, this is pretty good. You have experience in student government and in business clubs and AK Psi, for instance. So she put me in touch with a recruiter that kind of fast tracked me. Was fortunate enough to do well enough with a different interview series. And then I got that job offer. I will say though, and it's kind of a unique experience based on things I've heard from everyone else, that I had my final round interview in August of 2013, and I didn't get an offer until late October. So it was one of those things where, about mid-September, I remember being on the phone with my mom, and she was like, yeah, you should probably cut this one loose and start looking for other stuff. And I was like, yeah, it's just weird that they didn't message me at all. You'd think that they would say, hey, thanks for your interest, we're going to go with other candidates.
Right.
So when I was walking to school one day and I got that call from a number I didn't recognize, and I get calls from numbers I don't recognize a lot, but something inside of me told me, oh my God, I think this is Accenture. And so I just stopped.
That's awesome.
And there we are. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Can I ask, one of the things that when we focused on resumes were tangibles, things that people took action on, numbers, like I helped set up this event. We had 300 attendees, XYZ, that kind of stuff. So when you set up with your student government and the AKSI stuff and the things that got somebody's attention, was it just like a punch list of like, I was at Model UN, or was it more like I went and competed, we had this much, like was it bullet point, but like numbers? Did you have a lot of numbers in there? How did that look?
Yes. So I made it as quantitative and as tangible as possible. One thing that I emphasized, which is probably slightly unique, is I started an NGO called Friends of Nicaragua. So I partnered with a national NGO, and it was something that I started just because I wanted to do something that was focused on social work. Did that my junior year, and that was a really incredible experience where I got to talk about the story of building something from the ground up, of recruiting students and professors on campus, of fundraising money. So I was able to pump a lot of that into my resume. And that was actually what a lot of the folks that were interviewing me picked out when they were interviewing me, and they were asking me questions about that. So I trumpeted those leading experiences, as much as I could, as well as putting, some of the more bulleted items like, I was in Alpha Sigma Nu, which is an honor society, and I did this and that. That's
100%. That's and that's super important. That's why I wanted to draw attention to it, because I think that when it's hard for people to talk about themselves and to toot their own horn and talk about their accomplishments, but when you're literally putting your life on a sheet of paper to get somebody's attention, right? You've got to be quantitative. You've got to say that, hey, look, I've got to be organized enough where I was able to raise this much money as a, what'd you say, sophomore, junior, or, junior. Like that's something that a lot of people, they don't, sure, you were on the service committee and you helped raise some money for something, but did you track those numbers? Do you know what those numbers are?
Exactly. So it's tracking. So it's quantifying whatever I can. It's calling out the things that I think are unique about me, saying that I'm a part of a society, or saying that I was a part of Toastmasters, or, I joined the psychology club. Like, that's not going to really make me stand out. It's fine that you did those things, but I think what's more important, especially in consulting, because you get a wide variety of folks that apply to be a consultant. So what's more important, rather than having 10 general experiences, is having one or maybe two that you can talk a lot about. And then that's going to catch the eye of a recruiter or someone that's interviewing you. So those are the things I tried to call out.
100%. And so I love the idea too, that you took heavy initiative. You were like, consulting. All right, let me dig in. Found some information, jumped on LinkedIn, and actually did some homework, found some people to connect with. And so let me ask you about that. When you went to connect with them, were you saying, hey, I see you're interested in XYZ. Have you seen this article? Or were you like, hey, I saw you worked at this firm. I want to work there.
I mean, definitely more the first one than the second one. I tried to lead with interest and with humility, just kind of saying, what I've come to find, I've done that a few times. I've come to find that unless someone is either really busy or just, has a big barrier around them, most people are willing to have like a 5 to 10 minute informative or like information interview, if you will, where you just kind of are like, I would just love to learn It's not even necessarily saying I'm trying to get something out of you or I'm here with this intentionality. It's more just I want to learn more about what you do. Like I'm a senior, you know, I have a business degree. I think consulting sounds really awesome. It's obvious to me that you have been successful in your time at Accenture. I would just love to learn more about Accenture. I'd love to learn more about you know, your experience with consulting, maybe why you went into consulting, just stuff like that, where it's like, hey, you know, again, I'm not here with a hidden agenda. I'm not here because I want to get something out of you. I just want to get some information. If you're willing to chat, great. And then, you know, we'll kind of see where it goes from there. So it's that, it's that innocence and that humility. Yeah.
100%. And that's, it's a hard thing to do, you know, to reach out to somebody you don't know and ask for an informational interview. And, you know, the other, you know, I don't know, we'll jump into this either a little bit later. It's one of the follow-ups that I have on just in general, but like there's a guy out there who's kind of a media guru, genius, workaholic guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, and he puts a lot of stuff out there, but he has this 49-51, right? And so he wants to be the one that's putting in 51% of the relationship, right? He wants to be the one that's adding as much value as possible. And so that's why I make that comment of like, oh, I saw you were interested in XYZ. I saw this article and thought of you. Right. That's another way that some folks use to add value and start to build a connection and a relationship there. And so that's what I was wondering, like if you had specific intent, I was wondering how do you set that up? Because for the folks listening and watching at home, if if they wanted to come up with an actionable, tangible play-by-play of, hey, this is a good formula to put your feet in the door. So
it is. You're right. It absolutely is. So I do some real estate investing on the side, and that's something that I have found to be very successful is real estate investors, especially successful, experienced ones, are really busy. They have people, you know, hitting them up all the time for advice or for deals or what have you. So yeah, that's a great way to do it. Sending, you know, a survey that you might have had access to, sending some market statistics, whatever it is, and saying, hey, you know, thanks again for X or Y or Z. Here's some additional information that might be helpful to you. That's a great way to do it, I think. And I've
it's a relationship. Everything's relationships. I mean, that's just the way that it is. And you have to, you know, be a help, offer value in the whole trip. And so, but a lot of people that it's the act of doing and being able to come up with some tangible way that they can actually do that is tough. So you hunted, pioneered your way, got in, figured out, you're like, hey, Ant, I really appreciate you putting me on this path.
Honestly, all because of her. Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, and it just takes that one thing at that one time, that perfect thing at the perfect time, and then you're off and running. Let me ask you a little bit about kind of in that transition from school and college and into your position there. Did you have any, you mentioned student government, you mentioned AKSI, you mentioned clubs. What was give us an idea of what kind of your college experience was like, and any leadership roles that you took in any of those affiliations or clubs that you were in? Because I want to gauge kind of a day in a life, right? So what does it really look like, you know, dawn till dusk while you're going through college, getting all this stuff done?
Yeah. Another good question. And obviously that landscape or that story has changed wildly from year to year. They were definitely definitive chapters. But one thing that I will say, and I'm just going to call this out, is so at Siena University, I was in what's called the University Honors Program. And that was a classic liberal arts education where you just, for 2 years, you study history, literature, theology, and art from all the different time eras, starting with ancient Greek and moving up to modern day. And what I think was really helpful about being a part of that program was all of our finals were oral. So rather than coming in and taking a test or turning in a final paper, I mean, we did a lot of writing as well, but you had to come into a room at the end of every quarter and you had to present what you learned. You had to present an original and a unique thesis, if you will, to your 3 professors. They were all sitting there on the other side of the table. You had to justify your claims. You had to reference, you know, actual factual material from the books and the things that we had read. And for a freshman, being a freshman, kind of coming right out of high school, that is an extremely nerve-wracking experience. But over time, you know, you do that 6 times over the course of 2 years, 6 quarters. You start to figure out what enables you to be successful in that environment. How can I be a stronger communicator? How can I be more assertive and more confident in my claims? And those things, I mean, they're kind of your classic soft skills, but those things have translated directly into the business world and into my profession. So those types of experiences have been, I can't even tell you how invaluable they've been for me, and how often I reference them. Yeah.
There was a guy.
Yeah, so that's one thing.
There's a guy, Dennis Yu. He worked over at Yahoo. He transitioned. He's got his own firm now. And he was the smartest guy in the room, but he was also the quietest guy in the room. And he couldn't, like, he tells a story of not being able to get a job because he didn't know how to talk to people. He didn't know how to communicate. He could do algorithms, math, all of the hard science. He was just like, took him no time at all.
Right.
But it really took him a tremendous amount of work to be able to talk, communicate, listen. And like, and so I love that. That's an amazing general, you know, liberal arts degree. I don't think gets as much credit as it should. So didn't mean to stop you. I just.
No.
So
I completely agree. You know, I'd say day in the life of a time that I always reference, sort of the pinnacle of my craziness in college was my junior year, when I was overloading for my classes. I was overloading my classes. I was getting that NGO up and running. I was running for student government for the vice president of finance. And if I can be totally transparent here, I co-owned one of the biggest party houses on campus. So you know, from dawn to dusk, sort of like you were saying, it was just kind of running between meetings and events and class and nighttime activities and whatnot. For me, I'm fortunate in that I'm energized by the constant motion of things, and I'm definitely an extrovert. But you know, it was a bit crazy, but it was just kind of cordoning off the different sections of the things that I was doing, and making sure that when I was working on something, if that's writing my business plan for the NGO, if that's walking around shaking hands with folks while I'm campaigning for student government, to make sure that I was present in terms of what I was working on. You know, it's very easy when you have so many things going on, it's very easy to get boggled down and get overwhelmed by all these different colliding thoughts in your head. And when you're multitasking that much, you become rapidly very inefficient, I've come to notice. So just making sure, like even this interview, you know, you've probably seen folks coming in and out. I have a meeting in like a half hour for this co-working thing, but trying to stay focused and be like, I'm here, I'm talking with you. Let me just kind of shift gears and get into this mindset. Yep. And then when I move on to something else, I'll focus on that then. And that's something that has also been critical to my success, I think, in consulting, because your day often, you're working on so many different things and have so many different demands coming at you that you need to be able to structure your time and your work efforts accordingly.
I think you probably, this might make sense to you. And so it's extreme ownership. I think the book, they touch on it, where people want freedom. They want to feel like they have the freedom to do this, that, and the other thing, but really it's structure that gives you that freedom. And maybe it sounds like you might be one of those guys that if you're not hardwired to live and die by your calendar, your events, hey, I've got this thing, focus on this thing, then I'm going to switch the calendar. We're going to do the next thing. Is that, are you that kind of person?
Yeah, yes and no. I like to, you know, when I wake up every morning, I always have I have a little notebook that I carry with me, and I always have a to-do list of the things that I want to accomplish. I only ever get about 60% of it done, which is fine. But I think it's also, I mean, I at least try to be flexible in terms of, if I have sort of a structured day, but my manager or someone kind of comes at me and says, hey, I have this thing in the afternoon that I'd love for you to come to, being able to be flexible enough in your adherence to your schedule to say, yeah, I can make that work. Or yeah, you know what, I'll push this thing off. Let's do that instead. So I don't think I live and die by my calendar, but it's helpful it's helpful in terms of me knowing what are the critical things I need to get done, and what are the things that I'm pushing for, you know, say by end of the week or what have you.
Right. With a list, with a list like that, I mean, if you have it kind of everything compartmentalized, it's the same kind of idea, whether it's in a calendar or if it's on a list, you can take that project, that thing that you want to do, and you can shuffle it, you can pivot if you need to. So many people just don't even have anything written down, whether it's on a list or a calendar. It's just kind of fly by night kind of stuff. So, awesome.
And I've been that way. I've definitely been that way for years. I'm actually in the process right now of trying to create morning and nightly routines. So kind of like activities and things I do, you know, when I wake up in the morning and before I go to bed, that are the same day in and day out, at least during the work week, to kind of provide structured bookends to my crazy days. And that has been successful. You know, I can only plan for so much in the mania that is my typical day. But my night times, like when I come home, if that's at 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and then when I first wake up in the morning, those are typically areas that I can control. So I've come to find that if I have those on lock, then I can handle everything else, if that makes sense.
There was Durkin had this journal that he likes to use called the Volt Journal. Do you know Sean?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So he's got that journal is I got to pick up one. There's one that I like is the 10X Planner. Does the same kind of thing. Lets you kind of like tease out what your major objectives and goals are, what your tasks are, and then kind of has a bookend to the day and the night, which is pretty awesome. So, cool. When VP of Finance, that was a generalist. That was for the university, or if that was for AK Psi that you were.
No, that was for
the whole university. Got it.
So,
did you have any?
Go ahead. I was just going to say. All right, you go. You're in charge. You're in charge.
No stress, man. So I was just going to ask if you had any when you joined, right, AK Psi in your college career, and if you had any leadership roles, or if you'd worked on any projects within the chapter.
Yes. So there's a couple of things that I'll caveat that with. So number one, I pledged my senior year, which is pretty unorthodox based on the folks I've talked to. You know, most people do it when they're freshman or sophomore. So I pledged my senior year. I was already super busy because I was now the VP of Finance. So I had managed to secure that role. Things were up and running for me with the NGO, and I was just doing all these different things. So I had been sort of nominated to be the president of our pledge class, but I remember actually going up, and when we gave our speeches, I said, hey, you know, I think I would be good in this role. I appreciate the nomination, but I just honestly, if I'm being honest with myself, I would do a disservice to my pledge class because I just think I'm too busy to do it. So I kind of like voluntarily stepped down, and someone else assumed that role. In terms of AK Psi, once we were done pledging, the only thing I really did, again, because I only had 2 quarters in AK Psi as a student, I got really deep into our finance committee. And so that was looking at different investment strategies. We also had a running Investopedia stock simulator competition that was always fun. So that was something. There were a lot of finance majors within that committee, and finance was probably a close second for what I was going to major in. So I spent a lot of time with those guys, but other than that, I didn't hold a leadership role. I didn't do too much in terms of programming or anything like that. I just kind of networked a lot, became friends with a lot of people in my chapter, and went from there.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. And even if you just jump into, hey, let's deep dive into the finance committee or however you guys had it set up there, right? That you were a part of. You don't have to have your name on the door to be a leader, right? I mean, you work and lead by example with the experiences and stuff that you have. So you're bringing a lot to the table as being VP of finance for the university. And sitting down with folks, I'm sure that they appreciated the insights and and that too. I love the idea of having like the Investopedia and the competitions and like that.
Yeah, that was fun. I will say, and I don't, first of all, you know, for you, for anyone that decides to watch this, I don't mean this to sound pretentious, although it probably will, but I just have to call it out because it was such a funny experience. When I was pledging, especially being a senior, a lot of the brothers were kind of knocking me down a peg and putting me in my place, which I understood, because I kind of came in a little cocky, like a little, you know, hey, I'm a senior. I already know all you guys. I'm older than a lot of you guys. So come on, like, you know, you can interview me all you want, but let's be honest, like what's going to really happen here? That was my mentality. So everyone was kind of knocking me down a little bit, which was smart of them to do. But there was one moment when I actually had a team of brothers from AK Psi come and pitch to me as the vice president of finance, because I was in charge of budget allocation for all the clubs on campus. So they wanted to put an event, and then they came, I was pledging, and they were already brothers. So in that environment, it was sort of, you know, seniority, like the hierarchy was clear, but then they came in the room and it switched. And I just remember sitting there being like, well, hello, like, come on, you bring your A game. So that was fun.
That's an awesome experience.
Yeah. You know, I got to say though, like I was a bit laissez-faire about it when I first started pledging. Again, probably because I was a senior, I felt like I already sort of had myself figured out. But I was really surprised and impressed with the pledging experience, with the people that I met. And this is something that I love to say about AK Psi, which is I already had very strong friendships. I had my friend groups figured out by the time I was a senior. And yet once I was done pledging from AK Psi, there was two specific brothers, Jeff and Brett, who I met while pledging within AK Psi, and they're now two of my closest friends. And they're the people that I live with. They're the people that I travel the world with. So it's just this incredible thing where even at the tail end of my college experience, there was clearly a lot of room for me to grow and for me to expand and AK Psi taught me that. So that was awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, well, yeah, no, I mean, a little plug, but you put yourselves in those situations that may be difficult or different or whatever to grow. And so it's awesome that you still can, especially that late in a college career. So, well, let's touch on, there's a couple, we're starting to get a little long on time, but there's a lot of stuff I want to touch on with you. I feel like this we could probably jump in again and do a lot more. So I really appreciate you being here. But let's talk a little bit about kind of coming out of school. You said you do a little bit of real estate investing, and I want to know more about this co-work space and how you decided to be this type of entrepreneur and just kind of how it all got started for you. For those folks that are, you know, listening and watching at home, you know, it's not a linear that you go to school, get a job, and retire. It's not the 1940s or whatever, whenever that
That's
happened.
right. It's not. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about kind of what it looks like for you. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, and yeah, I'll try to be succinct here. So I recently returned in June from a year abroad experience called Remote Year. So yes. Yeah. And so I don't imagine many folks are familiar with Remote Year. It's still a fairly new startup and it's a new concept. But basically what it was my role at Accenture has the capacity to be remote. So I sort of flipped that switch. I took my laptop, I took some clothes, and I flew out to Valencia, Spain in June of 2016. And I met up with a group of 68 other professionals, not all from Accenture. Some of them were entrepreneurs, some of them were designers, you know, a wide variety of backgrounds. And we as a group traveled to 12 countries, one country each month, over the course of a year. And we did networking, we did professional development stuff. We met with a lot of local entrepreneurs and social developers in each country. Really, really, really awesome experience. I would highly recommend it for anyone. But that was important to me when I stumbled across it, because of my international business major. And I had gotten this job and was working pretty much down the hypothetical street. So I wasn't really doing anything international. So I came across this program and said, yes, that's for me. So I did that. And while I was doing that, I was working out of co-working spaces. And so co-working spaces are sort of the next generation of an office space where you have kind of these open format layouts. There's no cubicles or anything. And you have entrepreneurs and remote workers, just like a nice mix of professionals who are in the same space. You're networking. There's typically a lot of social and cultural and professional events that go on. So it's a really energetic and inspiring space to be in. And so I worked out of probably 30 of those over the course of the year. And I said, I love this. I love this lifestyle. I love this work style. I want to bring this back to the United States. And there's a lot of big co-working players in the US already. There's the WeWorks, which I imagine a lot of folks have heard of. There's a couple of other ones like Industrious. But there's still a lot of room to grow, especially here in the US, because the concept of remote work and working at home is still in play. It's still really coming about for these big corporations. So I said, I want to bring this back here. I looked to my left and my right, found a couple of partners within Remote Year to do that with, including my girlfriend, who was on the program with me. She's now my fiance. And so we came back here. We did.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, thanks. We did some city research. We traveled to Detroit, Oakland, Seattle, and Columbus, Ohio. And we landed on Columbus, Ohio. I won't get into the specifics of why, but it's a very hot, favorable market for that kind of stuff. And so here we are. So that's what kind of led me to that. And we're working with developers. We're kind of midway through, super pumped to get it started. And we're very ambitious about where we're going to go with that. So
I love this. I love this whole thing so much. So this is amazing. And this is why I think that we could talk probably on 10 shows. This, just keep going. So yeah. Two things I want to touch on for folks at home. Sure. Remote Year, right? Yes. You had to get permission from your employer to say, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. Why don't you go do that?
100%.
And then you also had to affiliate yourself in some way with Remote Year. So is that as easy as going to their website, signing up and cutting them a check? Or what does it look like to get into the Remote Year program?
Yeah. So just like with most competitive programs and, jobs and whatnot, there is an interview process. So you apply online and you apply through your LinkedIn. They verify that you are a legitimate employee. So you have to be employed. You can't just, take a gap year or kind of do your self-exploration journey, eat, pray, love kind of thing through Remote Year. That's not necessarily what Remote Year is for. So you have to be a working professional. You have to be able to contribute something professionally to the community. And so that's kind of what that interview process attempts to vet out. 3 rounds of interviews. And then they said, hey, yep, we would love for you and your girlfriend to join. We applied as a couple, and that was apparently gave us a favorable advantage. So, they've expanded a lot. Now they're launching. I was the 4th program, and there was a 6-month gap between when my program launched and the previous program launched, and then the next program launched. Now they're launching programs every month. So they're expanding rapidly, which I'm assuming means that the vetting process has probably gone a little easier. So, yeah, you can Google them, remoteyear.com. They're always setting up new programs. Like I said, they show you the itinerary, they give you the whole spiel, and then you apply online. For singles, it's $2,000 a month. Airfare, that covers all your lodging. That covers your memberships to these co-working spaces, as well as some of the events they put on and stuff. So it's a pretty good deal for the places you're going to. So that's how Remote Year works in terms of applying to it. For me, I was the second. There was actually an Accenture employee that did Remote Year 2, so part of the second program, but I was the second employee. And yeah, I basically pitched it to them about 8 months before I left, so gave it plenty of lead time. And said, hey, this is something I really want to do. There's professional reasons for doing it. There's personal reasons for doing it. What do you guys think?
That's perfect. That's perfect. There's a, and I just wanted to make sure that people at home had a clear understanding of, it's not just something that you cut a check and then they take you around the world for, You're vetted. You have to be a professional. Right. You 3 rounds of interviewing. So it's a kind of a heavy hitter of a thing, and they organize all these other meetups and networking events and get you into the co-working space. There's a lot. It's a very involved program. So that's super cool.
Yes. And it's more, just one quick thing. I mean, if you think about it, right, you as a Remote Year, the folks that are in charge of recruiting and of logistics, they're looking for people that are going to travel well together and work well together for a year in high stress situations. So it's not even necessarily just determining whether you're qualified or not, but whether you're the right cultural fit. I mean, you hear that all the time in jobs. Oh, we want to see if you're a cultural fit. No place like remote year is that more the case, you know, because again, because of the situations they're going to be in. So that's what they're looking for. Yeah.
Amazing. That's such a great thing. And then so with co-working space and jumping into real estate investment in such a way and finding partners in such a way, you are I'm going to use the word innately, but it's because you've put yourself in this position, right? You've been a consultant, you know, RFP, you know, you can do all of the different things that somebody would task you with. Now you can do them for yourself. And so how did you decide that that was going to be the direction that you wanted to go? And how did you settle on, you know, do you have other investments that you've done? You said you were a co-owner in the house back at university. Have you, you know, other houses, duplex, multi-commercial, or is this kind of the co-work space is kind of your big, you know, play into that?
Yeah. So there's two things. So the co-working is a bit more community and culturally focused, just wanting to do something that's awesome, wanting to do something that we can build, you know, a great community of people around. So that's kind of what's driving that forward. And that's unique for me in that it's really challenging. So I'm our group's CFO technically. I don't have a ton of deep financial you know, knowledge or experience. So I'm kind of teaching myself on the fly how to structure these financial documents, these profit loss statements, how to raise money from investors has been really interesting, figure out how to value my company. And these are all things that I love learning. I think they're really valuable skills to have in my back pocket. So I'm all in on it. I'm diving in every day, reading articles, talking to other folks in similar positions, trying to figure out how they do it. I will real quickly say that I eventually want to get into venture capitalism. And I think that this is one of the ways in which to do that, to sort of boost my candidacy. So that's the co-working side of things. And then parallel to that is real estate investing. So that's something that I'm doing. I started an LLC actually with 3 other AK-Psi alums. Awesome. So that's AK-Psi focused. That's more business oriented. That's more, you know, network building, profit, you know, financially focused and financially motivated, which I think is fine. I think real estate is a really interesting industry to be in. So we've places, you know, a couple of turnkey properties in Detroit, a condo that's still being built in downtown Seattle, and we, you know, we're still budding certainly, but trying to build something that in the long term hopefully can be a pretty awesome investment company for us.
100%.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any real estate background, or was it just something that you said, hey, you know what, 90% of the multi billionaires on the planet, they've all got, you know, real estate plays. We're going to do that. I mean, how did you come up and decide that was a direction that made sense to you?
That's it. I mean, most entrepreneurs, most people, at least within the business world, are very familiar with Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? With Robert Kiyosaki's, you know, so those types of books, you know, of course you also have 4-Hour Workweek, Grant Cardone, like just reading about a lot of these really successful guys and what their paths to success have looked like from a entrepreneurial standpoint, and also from an investment and a wealth creation standpoint. Real estate is always the biggest, if you will, lily pad on that pond, you know, the biggest stepping stone towards that beautiful, gorgeous thing that is financial freedom. So we made that decision. Yeah, we made that decision together. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to do, because I'm so glad that you're telling that story, and they're not hearing, and people who know me aren't hearing it again from me, and they're hearing it from you. And so the other thing is that we've never really had a conversation with each other until this moment. So it's not like I told you to say those things, and I'm just so happy that when we connected and here on, you know, right before my eyes, you're telling the same story and kind of people, you know, backgrounds like the and all that stuff. So it was cracking me up. I was dying inside. So
I love it.
That's perfect, man. So, well, let me ask you just a couple other quick questions.
Okay.
I know you've got a meeting you've got to run to as well. So right now on this kind of path to where you're headed, and you've had some incredible successes. You know, you're just 4 years out of school. What's that?
Thank you. I said that's generous of you, but thank you.
Well, I mean, you're doing it, right? And so it's evident, I think, you know. But if you were going to go back to, you know, your past self, like before your aunt said anything to you, while you were in those moments of I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know what things are going to look like ahead. Are there any, you know, give me 2 tangible pieces of advice that you would give yourself, tangible, actionable things that would help you get to where you are now faster, or that would have put you a few steps ahead of where you are now.
Sure, definitely. So there's 2 things that I'll say. Well, you asked for 2 things, so that's good. That works out. Number 1 is, and this is a very simple one, which is read more. To be honest, that's something that I was surprised at how difficult of a habit that was to build for me. But, you know, in college, and I imagine this is the case with most folks, I just became very accustomed to having my evenings be more about unwinding, shutting the brain off, you know, putting on Netflix or whatnot. But I've been ordering and reading, you know, books off of Amazon. I still haven't come around to getting a Kindle, which is pretty silly of me. So I just have a bunch of these stacks of hardcover books by my bed. But reading has been huge for me, and it's opened up my mind and expanded my view of things. I read things about, you know, I read about life management and personal success. I read about investing. I read about things about like astrology and biology. Like I'm just reading all these different things, just go. And it's been such an enriching habit within my life. And that's something that I wish I had done earlier on, because there's so many things that I've read and that I've sort of plucked out of these books I'm reading that I've then applied to other areas in my life. So it's sort of that cross-disciplinary approach where you read a science fiction book and you say, gosh, that's kind of a cool idea. And you mention it in a conference room for a business meeting, and someone takes that and makes it into something else. And before you know it, that books inspire, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is there's a lot of inspiration to get from books. So reading more is a big thing for me. And then number 2 is being focused more on long-term planning than on short-term gains, if that makes sense. And so I think that millennials, especially, as we've all heard, we're kind of a generation that's focused on instant gratification. And a very tangible thing that I can say is when I started investing in the stock market a few years ago, after doing a lot of the blue chip kind of boring stuff, I started saying, you know, this isn't exciting enough. This isn't getting my blood pumping. I'm going to start investing in penny stocks. And so I started putting money into all these penny stocks and losing. But it was just like that need for instant gratification, or for having something happen for me right away. And so I think if I had spent some more time sitting back, I was lucky in that my aunt mentioned consulting to me, and that ended up working out. But I think if I had spent more time taking a step back and thinking more long-term in terms of, you know, what's my 3-year plan? What's my 5-year plan? What's my 10-year plan? How am I going to get there? What are things that I can start doing for myself now that I might not reap the benefits of for years down the road, but eventually I will. And so I think it's that more long-term planning. And I keep going back to personal finance because I think that's such a big area where we can implement that thinking successfully. But, you know, so thinking even about something as simple as saving for retirement, like how can I be more prescient in my thinking and think more about where I'll be 20 years from now and how grateful I'll be for the things that I did now.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's Stephen Covey, right? Start with the end in mind. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People is you're spot on. Everybody's focused on now, not 10 years from now. And guess what? It's, you know, 10 years comes quick. You gotta, if you're not thinking about it, thinking ahead, it's gonna get you before before you're ready for it. So I love that so much.
One final thing I'll add, and this is just because I've been burned so much in the past, is being more humble. You know, I came into my job thinking I was a hot shot, thinking I was better than everyone else, just because I don't really know why I had that mentality. Maybe because I was a big fish in a small pond at Seattle University, but just being more humble, learning to listen to others, realizing that there's always folks around you who are smarter than you, who are better than you, who you know, at whatever it is that you're doing. And so there's always people to learn from. And so I think if you take a more humble and a more passive approach in terms of, I'm going to listen to what you have to say rather than speak first.
Yeah.
I just read an article about how the strongest leaders speak last in meetings. You know, great leaders speak last because they want to hear what everyone else has to say first, because that can impact their perspective or their thoughts.
100%. If you're the smartest guy in the room, you need to get into a different room, you know? So that's just kind of, so with, I love that the reading, I love the start with the end in mind kind of mentality. And normally, you know, I always like to, like, who are you following? Who are you taking advice from? But we can add in, like, you know, top 3, you know, books or something. Like what, you know, are there folks out there that maybe you've met them, maybe you haven't, but you consider them to be a mentor because they're doing and acting in a way that's in tune with the direction you want to go, or there's a specific author who writes a particular type of book that helps, you know, or there's a podcast, you know, who are you taking your advice from?
Yeah, totally. So, well, I mean, there's a few different people when it comes to, specifically when it comes to real estate investing and also establishing that sort of end first mentality. I do a lot of stuff with Bigger Pockets and with the Bigger Pockets podcast. So that's a real estate investment focused podcast and group of people, but they're all really smart folks who are just trying to make wise financial decisions for themselves, regardless of their backgrounds. Really great opportunity for networking. If you just go to biggerpockets.com, you know, you'll see thousands of forum posts and all these members who are just, I've come to find that the real estate industry, for the most part, is very collaborative. And so there's a lot of opportunity to work with other people. Even if you're not that interested in real estate, it's a place where it's a haven for a lot of smart thinking and self-motivated folks. So that's one area that I spend some of my time. A book that I just finished reading that I loved is a book called The Millionaire Next Door. So that's a book that some people might be familiar with. That's by Thomas Stanley, I believe it was. And he just came out with another one called The Millionaire Mind. And that was not necessarily because I'm sitting here saying, I really want to be a millionaire, but it's just, it's looking at, you know, this guy has spent decades doing a lot of research and speaking with a lot of the world's and the nation's most successful people and trying to distill from those interviews and from that research, what are the habits and what are the mindsets and lifestyles of really successful people? You know, what do they do on a daily basis? How do they approach problems? How do they, how do they pick themselves up by their bootstraps when life knocks them down? So there's a lot of wisdom in that book, and there's a lot of things that I've taken from it. So that's been great. I love reading, you know, I'm always reading articles on like TechCrunch and GeekWire and you know, Wired and stuff like that. So trying to follow what's going on within the tech industry. I just read Elon Musk's biography. I can't remember the woman that wrote it. There's a couple of them out there, but there's one. It's the most recently. I'm going to look this up real quick because that was such an inspirational read. Actually, was reading Elon Musk's biography. So that was cool. I'm trying to think about what else. You know, I don't have like a Twitter handle or anything, so I'm not necessarily keeping day to day on what specific individuals are doing. Yeah, I've been looking around the local Seattle market and trying to get a sense of who's getting together, like what some people call them masterminds, some people call them meetups, whatever it is, but just like, what are these different pockets of people that are like-minded that I can plug into? So I'm kind of in the process of getting involved with those. I'm happy to keep you updated on on the fruits of that search. but yeah, so that's kind of what I've been up to. So this is kind of random, but I really love listening also to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and just jamming with all the stuff that he does. And he has a book out called I think it's called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry.
Yeah, I just heard about that.
Yeah, so so books like that, those are completely my jam. Like that's the kind of stuff that I love reading, where it's like, let me just learn a little bit, kind of brush up on a topic or on an area that I don't know anything about, and see what it does for me. If it's just like if it ends up being just kind of a conversation piece, fine. If it ends up, I don't know, rewiring something deep in my brain there, then that's great.
Yeah. 100%.
But reading stuff like that. Yeah.
That's killer.
Yeah. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay. Are you still looking up Elon's book?
I have it right here. So it's because there's already, he's such an interesting dude. There's already a few biographies out there, but this one it's Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, and the quest for a fantastic future. That's the name of that's the title of the book, and it was written by. I'm just kind of waiting for this website to load here. It was written by a woman.
I can dig up the title. So
yeah. But that's the title of the book. And that was a fantastic read. I ripped through that thing in like a day and a half. That was really awesome. I had a really good time with that. Yeah.
So two last things to wrap up. I really appreciate you spending the time. This has been awesome. I'm going to try to link up with kind of like I'll dump your LinkedIn profile. So if anybody hears this, they can reach out that way, and some of the stuff you mentioned for, just resources, links in the notes there. But outside of running around, for work and doing this and doing all this other stuff, where's somebody most likely to, if they're kicking it in Seattle and they just run into you on the street, or where's somebody more likely to find you outside of just, behind your desk? Or
Sure. I spend a lot of my time in the Ballard Fremont area. So I spend a lot of my time there. I used to live there. I don't live there anymore. But that's where I spend a lot of my time. I'm starting to spend more time on the east side. So that's mainly Bellevue. I like taking, most of the folks that I meet with in the real estate industry live out in that area. So Ballard, Fremont, Bellevue. I don't spend too much time on Cap Hill anymore. Not that I have any qualms about that space, but I feel like I ran Capitol Hill into the ground when I was in college, and now it's just like, all right, enough's enough. Let's try out some other things. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's awesome. And then kind of you'll be semi-familiar with this question because I stole it from a guy named Brandon. But what do you think sets apart like people who are on that path to success versus those that never get started, wish away their days, never make it? Like, what do you think really makes up that kind of path to success?
Yeah.
Whatever success, whatever that word means to you.
No, totally. I think it's pretty simple. And so the one word I'll use is action. And what I mean by that is I also have a very bad habit of, in real estate, we call it analysis paralysis, but I think that translates to life as well, which is I can plan my days out and I can say, I'm going to read these 5 books and I'm going to do this and I'm going to plan. But eventually you find yourself getting lost in the planning and you're not actually doing anything. And sometimes honestly, and this is why I say that I don't necessarily live by a schedule, because sometimes what you need to do is you need to close that planner, you need to close that laptop, and you just go out and do it. Like I, for instance, I can sit there and say, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 months and I'm going to spend 5 days researching all the different, trainings I should do and my diets. And I'm going to come up with this crazy plan and all these different things, but you're not going to actually get to the point you want to get to until you lace up those shoes and go out and just go for a run.
Right. You have to run.
So don't worry too much. Right. Exactly. Don't worry too much about getting your plan perfect and nailing everything down point by point. Eventually you just got to go out there and do it, and you'll learn on the fly. That's what I think.
100%. Don't get lost in the minutia. Dylan, dude, I'm so excited to have had you on the show. I can't believe some of the topics that we've jumped into, and I had no idea that we would get there. And I'm just so pumped. So, thank you so much for making time. I know you're on a business trip out of town. I would love to connect back with you. Grab beers or even follow up on the show and figure out kind of what's next. What things have blossomed for you on your from looking at consulting to your dabbling in real estate and how all that comes together. But it's been an awesome time, a real pleasure to have you. I can't thank you enough.
Hey, Justin. Yeah, thanks so much. Hopefully I, said something wise in all of the all the words I spit at you. But yeah, thanks honestly for having me on here. It's great. I love the project. I'm definitely going to watch, all the other interviews you've done and the ones that you will do. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to you and to anyone else, I cannot be more of an open book. So please feel free to reach out, ask me any questions, do anything that you want. Find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, all that good stuff.
Perfect, man. Perfect. Well, we'll sign off and we'll talk to y'all.
Great.
Folks listening and watching at home, feel free to reach out and we'll talk to you again soon.
Great.